Hello, this is James Himm Mitchell, and I'm here with our weekly Lenormand Outlook. I returned last week to doing my standard line of 5, and it was met with some great response. Some people were very excited to see the line of 5 return, so I always try and keep my finger on the pulse and give the viewers and subscribers what they'd like to see. So I'm sticking with what is working right now. So I have taken the liberty of shuffling, cutting, fanning the cards, and picking our 5 cards for this week. And before I go any further, let me introduce the deck that's being used for this week's reading. I am using the Unforgettable Lenormand by Teri Smith over at Divine Walks, and so I will be posting a link in the description box below that will take you to a video that she has right here on YouTube that showcases all the cards in the deck, and I will also post a link to her site if you feel inclined that the deck speaks to you and you want to purchase a copy, that you can get it there. So as you know, with the line of 5, I always ask the question when I'm doing these weekly Outlook readings is, what do we need to know about any possibilities or potentialities for the week ahead? Because each of us is going to experience the week in a different way, in a way that's relative to our life experience. So this middle card always talks about what could be the focus or the central issue for the week. So we'll start there. And our card here is the dog. Okay, so for me, the dog represents, as a person, it could represent a friend, it can represent a partner, it can represent a companion. So the focus here could be, focusing on a friend of ours, or if you're in a relationship, your partner or your companion, things of that nature. Now, in terms of, traits or qualities, the dog could be somebody who's either helpful, loyal, supportive, or trustworthy. Now, it could also be, in addition to that, things having to do with trust, help, support, and being loyal. So it could be, if you are going to be, let's say, focusing on an issue with a friend, it could be, how could you be helpful and supportive to that friend? And it would be very interesting because the dog is looking to the card here on the right, so it would be interesting to see what the friend or the partner or the companion may be focusing on, or that area that we might be able to look to in terms of help, trust, and support. So those are my meanings for the dog. So now we'll look at the other cards that are surrounding the dog to give us more information as to what either could be the situation that the friend is going through, the partner, the companion, or that kind of help, support that the person might be needing. So we'll start with the card on the far left. Okay, we have the snake. So now the snake, for me, can represent a complication. It could represent a problem. It could represent things like betrayal, jealousy, envy. It could also represent a rival. Now, some people read the snake differently, and that's okay. So I know people think the snake can mean for them, based on their experience, it could represent things like healing and transformation. So if you happen to be a Lenormand reader, whatever the snake means for you, that's great. For me, I tend to see it more in my own experience with doing my own readings. For me, it represents a complication, or could represent something that is a long and winding process. So that's the snake for me. The card next to it is, this is the whip and the broom. So now, the whip for me can represent conflict. It can represent strife. It can represent things like arguments, fights, debates, being angry, things of that nature. But I also tend to look at it as a situation that is trying to be worked through and sorted out. So I'm seeing that. Now, I'm also seeing that we have 2 cards so far from the suit of clubs. If you look, we have, with the snake, we have the Queen of Clubs, and with the whip, we have the Jack of Clubs. And so clubs for me in cartomancy represent difficulty. So we have two cards that are representing difficulty on the one side of the dog. So could be, you know, the friend is going through an issue, you know, that he or she is angry about, because that could be what the whip can represent, things that we're angry about. So it could be something that the friend or companion or partner is angry about, or it could be an argument that we've had with a friend or a partner or a companion. And in that case, if that's the case, for whoever understands that or that message resonates, then the snake could be something like betrayal. It could be, you know, being lied to, because this card can also represent deception in that regard. So it could be, you know, a lie that became an argument, and that created a situation with this friend, partner, or companion. So I'm seeing that. Now on the other side of the dog, we have the clouds. Okay, so now we have another card from the suit of clubs, and this one is the king of clubs. So now we have the queen, we have the jack, and we have the king. And again, the clouds, just like the snake and the whip, can represent a challenge. The clouds typically represents things like confusion, uncertainty, doubt. And so it's always important to pay attention to what's on the dark side of the clouds, meaning the card on the dark side of the clouds. And so now we have the dog facing the dark side of the clouds. So it could be like the dog is facing some uncertainty, bewilderment, confusion, something of that nature. So it could be like this friend, partner, companion that we're talking about, or that the focus is here, is going through a time in which they feel a great sense of uncertainty. They're unsure about the future, because now the clouds being in front of the dog, or the dog facing the clouds, represents what's in front, or, you know, so what's coming up in the future. So, you know, being unsure about the future as a result of this past conflict over here on this side. So I'm seeing that. And so now the clouds has a dark side, but it also has a bright side. So I tend to look at this as, you know, being able to kind of look at, like, what's on the bright side? What's the silver lining here? And so this card would, on this side, could tell us maybe a little bit more about that. And that card is the clover. Okay, so now the clover represents opportunity. It represents luck. And in this regard, there are two cards in the deck that represent luck. The sun, which is the best card, represents big luck. And the clover, in contrast, represents small luck. So it could represent things like a short or a brief period of time. So I'm seeing that. So I would say too that, you know, there's, we could look at the pair here of the clouds and the clover, and I'm going out of order of my normal routine, but it's jumping out at me in the moment, says that this period of uncertainty that the friend or the partner or the companion is facing is going to be brief, because the clover is on the other side of that. So those are the cards. So now we can start looking at the pairing. So I always look at the cards that are flanking the middle card first. So we have the whip and the clouds. So we could read that as, you know, a conflict or strife going with the whip that leads to uncertainty, which is the clouds. Because if you remove the dog, let's do that for a moment. If you remove the dog and you put those cards close together, the dark side of the clouds is right next to the whip. So that's where I'm getting that, is because we're looking at the darker side of the clouds. And with that, it could also be about being angry and confused as a result of whatever the conflict is, like the conflict here with the whip. You know, now we're feeling angry, going with the whip again, and a sense of confusion and uncertainty going with the clouds. So I'm seeing that. So we'll slide them back, and we'll put the dog back in view there. Okay. And so now the next pairing, we look at the outer cards, which we have the snake and the clover. And so going with that, again, keeping with my idea that the clover represents something brief or short term, then the pair could be read as a brief or short term complication. Now, going with the inset of the Queen of Clubs, we could look at that as a lucky woman, or a woman who becomes lucky, or a woman who receives an opportunity, because the clover can also represent an opportunity. So then the next pairing, we have the snake and the whip. So I would read those as possibly being a complication, going with the snake, that needs to be worked through or sorted out or cleaned up, because the broom here is closer to the snake card, whereas the whip here is closer to the dog card. So since the broom here represents something that's getting cleaned up, it would represent a complication that needs to be cleaned up. Now, the whip also represents something that's repetitive. It represents repeat activity. So this pair could also be read as a repeat complication. And then going with the idea that the snake can represent a rival, because some people look at the snake as the other woman. So I tend to not necessarily reduce it down to gender, even though it has a queen of clubs, but the idea of a rival doesn't necessarily have to be gender specific. So I could look at this as, competing, going with the whip, with a rival. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing with that pair. And then shifting gears to the other side, with the clouds and the clover, I would look at this as, again, like I said before, a brief period of uncertainty. And then going, like I said before, going with the bright side. So if you look at the dog as an advisor, because advisors are people who give help and support and guidance to other people. So if we're in a position that, we're going to be offering this friend, this partner, this companion some help or support, then one of the things that we might feel inclined to do, or since the cards here might be encouraging us to do, is to get the person to look on the bright side. So, we could say on the bright side that this period of uncertainty, it will be brief. How can we best help them move through it, or help them work through it? And the thing about the clouds is that the clouds are, something that's temporary, because clouds come and go. They travel across the sky. They're not, permanent. So it would say that in time, this too shall pass. That's just the expression that just popped into my head. So getting to help the person see that at some point they'll move through this. And it could also be, and I don't know this for sure, I'm seeing this as, that expression, like something that's a blessing in disguise. So it could be like, even though it's difficult now, they may get to the point with the clover being at the end, see the blessing in the situation, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing that with the clouds and the clover. And so the other thing we can do to kind of create a summation, and so now, what I love about doing these videos and the people who are Lenormand readers, everybody sees such wonderful things. So I'm going to offer what I'm seeing, and it will be interesting to hear what other people are seeing. So this is how I would read the line for me, just one possibility. A complication with the snake that needs to be worked through, sorted out, going with the whip. Concerning a friend, because now remember the dog is the focus, so concerning a friend facing a brief period of uncertainty. And then going back with keeping with the dog being the central focus, is that, then it could be about how can we best help and support this person through this difficult time. And then with the whip coming before the dog, one of the things that we might want to assist the person or help the person through is keeping them from beating themselves up, which is one of the things that I always see with the whip. Sometimes this card can be about how we beat ourselves up, but with it coming right before the dog, it could be like this friend who's in this spot. How can we help them not beat themselves up? That kind of thing, and torture themselves, punish themselves, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing that. And so now what we'll do is we'll move to doing what I call the hidden dynamics. And that will feature the playing cards of the deck. Okay, so now we're going to do what I call the hidden dynamics. And that, like I said in the previous segment, uses the playing cards that are assigned to each of the Lenormand cards. So going from left to right, we have the Queen of Clubs, we have the Jack of Clubs, we have the Ten of Hearts, we have the King of Clubs, and we have the Six of Diamonds. So as I said before, the first thing that struck me was that 3 of the cards come from the suit of clubs. And in cartomancy, the suit of clubs represents difficulties, and as you can see, we get that association because of the cards that they're attached to themselves. So the snake is a challenging card, the whip can be a challenging card, and the clouds can be a challenging card. So just going with that alone, we can see that this could be a week where somebody that we know, keeping the focus on the dog, somebody that we know is going through a difficult period of time. So we have 3 face cards. We have the Queen, we have the Jack, and we have the King. So the first thing that strikes me is that we have the Queen and the King of the same suit. And so that can represent a couple, because they come from the same suit. So it could be like a long-term couple, a couple who's been together for quite some time. And then adding the Jack into the mix, it could be that this couple is going through, you know, a difficult time, and so there's anger, they may be having heated words exchange, they may be arguing, they may be having spats, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing that. So that would be one thing that jumps out at me using that. So then the hidden dynamics consist of looking at the pairs of the inner and the outer cards and adding them together to kind of create another card that's going to offer us more guidance or insight, possibly. So here with the Queen on the snake, that's 12, because Jacks are 11 in cartomancy, Queens are 12, and Kings are 13. So we have 12 with the Queen, and we have 6 with the Six of Diamonds. So 12 and 6 is 18, and isn't that interesting? Because now one of the dynamics is that we have the dog, which is also our focus card. So normally I put the cards at the top, but I felt like I wanted to do something different, so we're going to put them at the bottom, so this way they'll be closer to the screen. So that's the dog. So again, it's all about, on one side here, you know, keeping the focus about a friend, partner, or companion. Then this card would be help and support. And then now going with the inner cards, we have the 11 with the Jack and the 13 with the King. So 11 and 13 is 24. Let me just make sure I'm right. Yes, 24. And so the 24th card in the deck is the heart. So put this on the other side. And so now the heart represents things like love, it can represent romance, it can represent passion. So now if people are having a spat, if they're angry, you know, if they're arguing, that could be coming from a place of passion. They're really passionate about their position, about how they feel in the moment. So I'm looking at the picture, and I know this is not a Lenormand thing, but I'm looking at the picture and I'm seeing that the heart is exposed. And so it could be about an issue about people feeling like they've been exposed, or they're really needing to expose how they feel, that kind of thing. I'm thinking about the idea of, like, you know, having my heart open, you know, that kind of thing. And so with that, one of the things, if we go with the central focus being the dog, about being how can we best help or support a friend, a partner, companion going through a difficult time, and again it's reinforced with the dog on this side, then it could be saying that one of the things we could do is we could be loving, And we could be empathetic, because for me, the heart represents having a great deal of empathy. So like, and in that case, then it would be like having your heart go out to this person, kind of thing. And even with the person who may be going through the difficult time, if it is as a result of, you know, they're having an experience with their friend or their partner, then how can they turn from being angry, you know, being angry and jealous and envious, or whatever the kind of emotions that are coming up with the combination of the snake and the whip, you know, how can they turn that into love? I'm hearing in my head a Kylie Minogue song called "Turn It Into Love." So how can they turn those feelings from the negative side, going to the clouds, to the more positive side? You know, that I'm seeing all of that kind of thing. But, you know, the idea of like, how can we allow ourselves to have our hearts go out to these people, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing that. And then the final thing that we can do with the playing cards is to add them all up. So I'm going to put the dog back here for a moment. And so going from left to right, we have 12 with the queen, we have 11, we have 10 because the dog is the 10 of hearts, we have 13 with the king of clubs, and then we have 6. So that gives us a total of 52. And so since there's only 36 cards in the deck, when I get a number over 52, I add the digits together. So we'll add 5 and 2 together, and that gives us 7. And isn't this interesting? So now we keep getting cards that are already in the line showing up. And so now we have the snake as the total pip card. And so now the snake could suggest, again, for me, it would represent a complication. It could represent things like jealousy and envy, and it could also be, you know, one of the things that may be needing to be worked through is this sense of betrayal, you know, especially if we go with the heart being a matter of the heart, or a love relationship or a romance. Then it could be, you know, there's been some sort of complication. It could be going back with the idea of, you know, a rival. Then it could be like maybe the issue is another person is in the mix, you know, kind of thing. And so how can we work through that? So I'm seeing that. And so now what we'll do is we'll do one final thing to wrap things up, and that will be looking at what the final advice card is, going with the totals that are, or the numbers that are on the top of each of the cards. Okay, and so now we're going to do the one final technique that I always use, and I always say this in every video, that the Lenormand for me consists of 3 different aspects. It consists of the central image, it consists of the playing card, and then it also has a number that it's assigned. So what I do is I take the numbers that are on the top of all the cards and add them together to kind of give us the essence of what the reading is about. So we have a 7 with the snake, we have 11 with the whip, we have 18 with the dog, we have 6 with the clouds, and we have 2 with the clover. So that gives us a total of 44, and again, it's a number over 36 because there's only 36 cards in the deck. So we take the 4 and the 4, add it together, and we have 8. So now the 8th card in the deck is the coffin. And so this card represents something coming to an end. It represents something being over, something being finalized. You know, so one of the things, keeping with the focus, is, you know, one of the things that this friend, partner, companion might be going through, it might be, you know, reaching a state of closure. What I like about this image in particular is that the pallbearers are carrying the person who has passed away, you know, to his or her final resting place. So I always look at this as like, what do we need to do to put an issue to bed or to rest once and for all? You know, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing that in terms of what the coffin means. You know, one of the things that, for the brief period of time, going with the idea that the friend, partner, companion is facing a time of uncertainty, and confusion, is that the coffin sometimes warns us of, the idea of being closed off. And remember what I said about the heart being, how can we open our hearts up? This could bring about a situation in which the person feels emotionally closed off and shut down with the coffin. Going with the idea that the coffin symbolically represents a tight space. It represents something that forms a limitation or restriction. It could be like, how do we box ourselves in? And so one of the things that we could do is that we could decide to emotionally close ourselves off, emotionally shut ourselves down, that kind of thing. And we may do it in a way to protect us, to keep us from feeling things, to keep us kind of numb. Sometimes we think it may be better not to feel anything, and that might be for a brief period of time. We might need to go through that, that kind of thing. So I'm seeing that. But for me, the coffin represents, bringing something to a state of closure, finalizing something that needs to come to an end. So that is the final card. So summing up, we had the snake. The snake for me represents a complication. It represents a long and winding process. It could also represent, the idea of, being jealous, being envious, having to deal with the threat of arrival, that kind of thing. The whip represents things like being angry, having a conflict or strife that has maybe led to an argument. And then with that, it's like, how do we try and work through that, sort through that, clean it up? The dog being the focus is, it could be a friend, a partner, a companion to us, or, somebody that we know who has an issue with a friend of theirs, their partner, their companion, and how can we offer help and support to help the person move through it? The clouds, with the dog facing the clouds, it's facing a period of uncertainty, confusion, doubt. And then with the clover rounding things out, understanding that while they may be moving through this period of confusion and uncertainty, it will be brief, and that hopefully, we can assist the person in seeing the silver lining, the blessing in disguise, that kind of thing. So this has been this week's Line of 5 Weekly Lenormand Outlook, and I am James Himm Mitchell, and I look forward to sharing this space here with you in our next video. And until then, take care and try, I'm saying try because of all the difficult cards in this week's reading, try to have a great week. So take care.